As I have told you before also that this story is about transformation. Okay, metamorphosis means transformation. In book 3, this book consists of 6 main stories, whereas the 7th one is inserted within the 6th. What we find here is that there is a connection between um, all these stories. There is a connection between all these stories, and they are connected in a way where the house of Thebes, that is the house of Cadmus, is linked with it. Okay, so today we will deal with the fate of Cadmus. Okay, in book 3 we will be starting book 3, and we will see how the fate of Cadmus is dependent on the actions of the gods, especially Jupiter. And what we find here is that this character Cadmus is not able to return to his home, and what we find here is that this whole story of birth of Bacchus and everything is linked or initiated with the kidnapping of Europa. Clear? Europa was kidnapped by Jupiter in the form of a bull, and what we find after that, all this turmoil starts. Clear? So after all this, what we find? We find that this description, as I have also given you before, the description of the gods and everything, their counterparts in Roman mythology. Today what we find here is that this description is important. In your syllabus, what you have the birth of Bacchus. Bacchus is the son of Zeus and Semele. Okay, and Semele is the daughter of Cadmus, who is the king of Thebes. But before that, we should know how he is becoming the king of Thebes, right? So we will deal with that in the next slide. Okay, so this is Cadmus's story. Okay, so it starts, book 3 starts with this. Clear? So Cadmus, if we try to align with this, if we try to focus on the story of Cadmus, we have to start from the beginning of the story where Europa was kidnapped. Okay, so Europa's father's name was Aegina. Okay, Europa's father name was Aegina, and Aegina is also the father of Cadmus. So Aegina threatens Cadmus with exile if he is unable to find Europa, okay, who has been kidnapped by Jupiter. Cadmus tries to find out where Europa is, but he is unable to do so. Okay, he is unable to find Europa. So he tries, but he fails. But what we find, he has been cast out of his house, because Aegina had said to his son that he will not allow him to return if he is unable to bring back his daughter, that is Aegina's daughter, or bring back Cadmus's sister. Clear? So what we find here is that he can't go home, so he prays to Apollo, that is Phoebus Apollo. Clear? He prays to Apollo. Where should he live? Where should he find his existence? He need to live somewhere, right? And Apollo gives him a description gives him a description in the oracle. He gives him a description that he should be living in a place where a heifer sits down. What is a heifer? Heifer is a white cow, holy white cow, who has not borne a calf. Clear? So Apollo says he will says a pristine heifer will lead him to a place where he will establish a city. Okay, so what is the city? A city that would be established, which will be named Thebes. Okay, so after this prophecy, Apollo's prophecy, he saw Cadmus saw a heifer. He followed that with his followers, with his companions, and he reached a place where the heifer laid down. Clear? So Apollo's prophecy came true. Clear? Now Cadmus was going to offer sacrifice to Jupiter, because you know that Jupiter is the prime god or the king of all gods, right? As Zeus is the king of all gods in Greek mythology, similarly the counterpart is Jupiter in Roman mythology. Clear? Or Jove to say. Okay, so he is going to offer a sacrifice to Jupiter. So he asks his companions, his followers, or his servants to say to bring some water, okay, for the libation purpose. লিবেশন মানে জানিস নিশ্চয়ই আহুতি বা হচ্ছে স্নান করানো, পরিষ্কার করানো পুজোর জন্যে বা যে কোনো মঙ্গল কাজের জন্যে. সো হি কমান্ডস হিজ সার্ভেন্টস অর হিজ কম্প্যানিয়ন্স to bring some water from a running spring, and they followed his commands. Clear? They followed his commands, but it led to another thing. The spring from where they were going to bring this, going to bring this water, that place was a sacred grove. That spring was sacred to Mars. Okay, so the companions who went there to fetch the water from the fountain, it was actually the fountain of Mars, and that fountain was protected or guarded by a dragon. And the moment Cadmus's companions went there to find some water or take some water, the dragon devoured them. মানে তাদেরকে খেয়ে ফেলে দিল, তাদেরকে মেরে ফেলে খেয়ে ফেলে দিল, as because the dragon was protecting that fountain which was sacred to Mars. Okay, so what we find here is that this would obviously enrage Cadmus, right? Because he is the protector. He is the protector of these people. He has been thrown out of his family. He is living in a new place, and if he is the leader, he should be the protector of them also. Clear? So what we find here is that besides transformation, another thing that is present over here is the violence. Clear? And in this first story, what we find epic characteristics. What epic characteristics? Epic characteristics is about the fighting, the great fighting, where the hero would fight some odds for his people, and he would win that war for establishing benefit for his own people. Right? So what we find here is that this thing is being done. As I have also told you before, in previous classes that Ovid's Metamorphoses was written in the form of an epic, and what we find here is that those epical qualities are put into the mythological framework, right? So this mythological framework is being put into place in order to show how Cadmus is a heroic figure, almost like an epic hero. Clear? So in any of the epic, there is a battle, there is a problem which needs to be overcome. So in this case, in this story, in this part of the story, in the story of Cadmus and the establishment of Thebes, what we find, in order to establish Thebes, in order to find a place for living after being thrown out of the his own house, in his own kingdom, or his father's kingdom better to say, he needs to sustain, and he also needs to protect his own people who actually believe in him. Okay, so what we find here is that these companions who are being devoured, they are dead, but at the same time what we find, these people needs to be protected by the leader, and that is what is being done by Cadmus. Cadmus is enraged after hearing this devouring by a dragon. So what he does, Cadmus says that he will himself go there and kill that dragon. And on discovering that, Cadmus goes there and slays the dragon. But one thing he was unaware of. He was unaware of the thing that he was the person leading the people, but he was unaware of the fact that this dragon was sacred to Mars. Okay, or the fountain or the spring was sacred to Mars, and the dragon was protecting Mars's fountain. Clear? So Minerva advises him. Minerva is the goddess. Minerva advises him to sow the teeth of the dragon in that soil where the heifer has laid down. Okay, so Minerva advises him to sow the teeth, and Cadmus follows that, and immediately after sowing the teeth in the soil, what it does, immediately it produces several armed men. অনেকগুলো লোক উঠে আসছে, যারা হচ্ছে এই আর্মড মেন, ঠিক আছে, তাদের কাছে অস্ত্র রয়েছে। So what we find, they quarrel among themselves and also kill each other. Clear? So what we find here is that this theme of violence is also a poignant topic of Ovid's Metamorphoses. Clear? And what we find here is that this violence is not just limited to the violence brought down on human beings by gods, but it has also been the other way round. How? It has been in a way where God's action have enraged the human beings. Okay, so the violence is not one way. Okay, so the violence had been from the end of gods towards human beings. It has also been by human beings, the violence, the rage has been from the human being side towards gods, unknowingly or knowingly. ওকে, জেনে করেছে, গডসদের প্রতি রাগ দেখিয়েছে বা মেরে ফেলেছে গডসদের কোনো একটা সিম্বলকে, যেরকম এই ড্র্যাগনটাকে, রাইট? সেটা কি, সেটা হচ্ছে সে জেনে করেছে বা না জেনে করেছে, বাট তার রেজটা বা তার ভায়োলেন্সটা গডের এগেনস্টেও রয়েছে। অ্যান্ড also what we find that this rage is also between human beings, where you see these armed people are actually fighting among themselves and killing each other. Clear? So as you are willing to, not you, Cadmus, as Cadmus was willing to establish a new country and to live there, but if the people who have come out like a crop, okay, from the soil, they were killing each other, how would he establish a country? So after all this killing is done, okay, so after all this killing is done, what do we find? We find that this person, there are 5 people actually living, there are actually 5 people who are left, who actually are in this position, who are left alive, and they agree to live in peace. Okay, they agree to live in peace, and what we find, after agreeing, they they deal with Cadmus to live peacefully, and they help Cadmus to establish Thebes. Clear? So what we find here is that you can see that a formation of a country is itself based on the topic of violence. Okay, so what we find here is that this assistance to Cadmus in building the city is also dependent on the willing to live in peace. But before that also, what we find, that there is this hint, there is this idea, there is this exertion of violence which has led to several people. But this is also good in a sense that those people who are actually unaware or not for peace are actually killing themselves, and those people who are actually believing in the idea of peace, they are remaining here in order to establish a city, a new city, which is Thebes. And you will find this name Thebes in your another text that you have, that is Oedipus the king. So what we find here is that this whole story of transformation starts with the story of this person, this not person, god Jupiter into a bull who takes Europa, and the following story follows, right? Another transformation that is happening over here is a transformation from immaterial thing to material. Okay, so we see 2 types of transformations over here. Physical transformation. Okay, so the physical transformation that is happening over here is that from a god to an animal. Okay, Jupiter turns into an animal. Clear? Next, what we find, next transformation that we find is the transformation from a material or a part of an animal to human beings. Clear? That is from the teeth of the dragon to human beings, and they are the future citizens of Thebes. Right. So this transformation, as I have told you also, that this transformation uh, is not one way round. ওকে, শুধু একদিকে ট্রান্সফরমেশন হচ্ছে না, শুধু মানুষ থেকেই হচ্ছে পশুতে, বা গড থেকে হচ্ছে মানুষে, বা গড থেকে অ্যানিমালে, শুধু একদিকে হচ্ছে না. দিস ট্রান্সফরমেশনস আর অফ ডিফারেন্ট কাইন্ড. Okay, and these different kinds of transformation are actually bringing in a variety to Ovid's Metamorphoses. Clear? So what we find over here is that this whole story of transformation is leading us to understand what the real idea of transformation is. Okay, but another thing that I have told you before also, the transformation means, or the metamorphosis means transformation, and transformation means change. So what is this change all about? চেঞ্জটা কিরকম? চেঞ্জটা কি শুধু হচ্ছে ফিজিক্যাল হবে বা বাহ্যিক হবে? The change is not just physical transformation. Okay, the transformation is not just limited to this physical outlook. Okay, so what it is related to? It is related to also the transformation of your own existence. Okay, so in the beginning of book 3, what we find? We find Cadmus is in exile. Okay, he was supposed to be the king of his own place after his father, but his fate turned around and he is left nowhere to live. Okay, one incident changes his whole life. That is a change. And after his struggle and the help from gods, what we find? He is able to establish himself in a new place, in a new way, as a king. Okay, so this is the transition. This is the transition and transformation of a person who has lost everything. Under the power of his father due to the actions of Jupiter, but still he is able to exert his own existence. He faces difficult struggles, he faces several problems, but at last he is able to establish himself in a way where he is able to be the king of a new place. He establishes a completely new race of people. Okay, so what we find here is that this metamorphosis is not just a story for amusement. Okay, this story is not just for amusement. It also gives you a moral teaching. How? It gives, or it shows you, that even if you are a king, even if you are a smallest person, you will face problem. It is, the problems are not just limited to weaker sections of the society. A prince can also face similar situation. If a prince can exert his power, obviously with a divine help, you can also do the same. Okay, you can also do your bit in order to re-establish yourself. ওকে, জীবনে অনেক সময় আসবে যখন অনেক কিছু হারিয়ে যাবে, ঠিক আছে? এমন সময় আসবে যখন মনে হবে কিছুই তোমার হাতের মধ্যে থাকছে না. ইট ইজ লাইক স্যান্ড ইন ইয়োর হ্যান্ডস, ইন ইয়োর পামস. দ্য মোর ইউ প্রেস, দ্য মোর ইট গোজ অ্যাওয়ে. বাট be like Cadmus. Be brave, be bold, be courageous in order to face any challenge that has been thrown to you. Okay, so you need to face, obviously you need luck, you need divine help, obviously, but you need to exist, you need to be in a place where you should have the ability, you should have the ability to exert your own power to change your life around, to change your life around for your betterment and for the betterment of the people who are connected with you. Clear? The Cadmus, the Cadmus' story, or the fate of Cadmus and the establishment of Thebes, teaches us this. Okay, so what we find here is that this story is not just for amusement. This story is also made for or written for people to learn a lesson from it. Okay, learn a lesson from it so that they, even if they face the challenges like Cadmus, they are able to overcome that. Okay, have you understood?